Hiya, teacher friends. Are you interested in teaching English on iTalki? Well, you came to the right place. And today I'm going to talk about teaching pronunciation on iTalki. There are a few reasons why we should talk about teaching pronunciation. This is something that a lot of students are actually very not at ease about. They're insecure about their accent and their pronunciation. B, a lot of students actually come onto iTalki specifically to work on pronunciation. It is like a monkey that they want to get off their back, right? But C, it's not necessarily that everybody wants to work on, and there are certain reasons for that. And I want to talk today about the different descriptive and prescriptive methods of teaching English. So I'm going to talk about 10 tips that I would give any teacher in terms of teaching pronunciation. This is judgment free. A lot of the mistakes that I'll talk about today are mistakes that I made, misconceptions that I held when I first started. I also want to talk about some crucial points that you want to focus on with your students if you do decide to work on pronunciation and if that's what they're paying you for. All right, so rule number one, pronunciation is not everything. That's the first thing to remember. And I think it's actually good for you to explain that to your students as well, especially if they feel insecure about that. In my view, speaking is the most superficial aspect of language in the sense that it is the first thing that we recognize. It's the first thing that it's the first giveaway that somebody is native or not native, right? And for a lot of native speakers who don't know a lot about the language and about the language learning process, it's actually a way by which that we judge people, right? And that we criticize people who are learning English. We have no idea what their listening, reading, or writing skills are. We just hear their speaking skills, and we make a lot of judgments based off that, right? So the first thing, just realizing that speaking is one of the most face value aspects of our language, and pronunciation is probably the most superficial of the most superficial aspect, because we listen to their accent, we listen to the pronunciation, the accuracy, intonation, and the syllable stress, more so than we actually listen to the grammatical accuracy or vocabulary choice. So I think it's important for us to recognize the different aspects of English, the different categories, and to communicate to our students that you could still be a really good English speaker, even if your pronunciation is not native-like. Number two, look for patterns. I've spoken about this. This applies to everything. On iTalki, when we're talking about vocabulary, when we're talking about grammar, don't pick out the first word that is mispronounced. That could be mispronounced. That could actually be a mistake. That could be an oddball. That could be a write-off. And if you choose that one thing and hold on to it, that is, to me, that's not a great way at building rapport with your student. And it could actually damage their confidence. I know some students want you to pick out every single mistake that they make. That's okay. But in any case, it's easier to focus on the words that are high frequency. So we'll talk after about certain words that we should focus on because they're high frequency words, but also on sounds that are very common. Yeah. Okay, number three, we should be descriptive, not prescriptive, okay? So there's no right way of speaking English, but there is a standard way of speaking English. So a lot of what we do in the applied linguistics field, we look at not what you should be saying, because I mean, at one point in time, American English was alien, right? Like American English was not the correct English. Language is something that morphs and that changes. So instead of saying what is right or wrong, it's best to say what is more common. Yeah, this word is usually pronounced this way. And that applies to grammar, that applies to vocabulary as well. This isn't, for me, I recognize that a lot of my students don't have the luxury to kind of tiptoe around this very cosmopolitan idea of language learning. They want to learn the Queen's language, or they want to learn American English. They want to speak it the way I speak it. That could happen with your students as well. In that case, I think you should be understanding, right? They have their goals, and it is the way it is, right? But at the same time, I think that we could correct their pronunciation without being prescriptive, without saying this is what you should do, and just say you could say this word how you want to, but the majority of the time it's pronounced like this. Usually people say drama, they don't say drama, but if you want to choose to say drama, then that's okay, as long as people understand you in the context. Because really what we're focusing on is meaning and not just form. Number 4, speaking ability does not equate to listening ability. Yeah, I think that there must be dozens, hundreds of teachers on iTalki who listen to their students, maybe a lower proficiency way of speaking, and they start to talk to them like this. No, there are many students that learn in environments from a very, very young age. They learn grammar, reading, writing, and listening. They don't have a lot of ability to communicate, to speak, to practice their oral skills, but their listening could be up at C1 level, and their speaking could be down at barely B1 level, yeah? So again, before you jump to conclusions, I think that you should find ways to test their listening, to test their listening ability, listening for meaning, listening accuracy, yeah, for key information, for numbers, for names. Try some spelling quizzes with your student if you want. Like, those are always fun. And I think this is better than to just hear them speak and to assume that this is the speed that that you should speak to them at. Number 5, pronunciation can be linked to grammar. Yeah, and I always use the example, especially with a lot of my Spanish students. Some of them, instead of saying it's, they say is or is, right? So when we hear this pronunciation error, we don't know if it is a pronunciation error or a grammatical error. And it all comes down to their understanding, because I mean, if they think that it's and is could be used interchangeably, this could link into reading issues as well, or writing issues too. So in that case, you want to bring it up to them. However, if it's just a pronunciation problem, I mean, people usually know, it's my dog, or yeah, it's my car. Like, people know you mean it's, right? But clearly it's this could kind of be linked to grammar. So pronunciation and grammar, or pronunciation and vocabulary accuracy, they're not always separated. Sometimes they are pillars of the same structure. And this is also with some of my Italian students using these and these. Yeah, so the long I, the short I, and we'll talk more about that after. Again, is this just a difficulty with their accuracy in pronouncing the short I? Or is it a misunderstanding of the plural and singular, right? And this is a really important thing as well, especially because a lot of your students might be working with English. They might be sending emails, and their writing ability might even be more important than their speaking ability. So it's good to explain these things to your students, right? And to call them out if you hear these errors. But the important thing is just for them to be exposed and to be aware of them. Number 6, patterns can be cultural. And I think this is, again, to come back to how important it is for us English teachers to learn a language, or at least to make a go at it, to try. Because honestly, I could say my German, some of my Iranian, my Turkish students, a lot of the time they mix up the wa and the va sound. A lot of my Chinese or Korean students, it's the L or the R sound. The Italian, Spanish, they usually pronounce S instead of X, so they'll say S sample, for example, or the R sound, the short I, long I sound. A lot of my Brazilian students have a very heavy when they say a word like up. Yeah, so I'd call that the U sound right there. So definitely to recognize some of these patterns is really important. It's really important for you, and it could save you so much time because I mean, when I go into a class with a student and I know where they're from, I'm like my radar is on. I am waiting to hear these sounds pronounced that way. Um, and if they don't pronounce it that way, I make sure that I tell them a lot of my students from Italy find this sound challenging, or a lot of my students from Russia find the R sound challenging. But you're actually able to do it, and you are able to make this sound with considerable accuracy. So congratulations. Yeah, so I think that this is like a double edge, or this has two benefits, I suppose, because if you're able to detect and to compartmentalize these sounds, which aren't always mispronounced by culturally, but more often than not are. If you're able to do that, you're able to anticipate the difficulties that the students will have with pronunciation, but you're also able to find the ways that your students have actually overcome and surmounted these difficulties as well, and that could be a great way for you to give them more motivation and more inspiration for the future by telling them, "Wow, you actually have a really good control over this." Okay, number 7, accept your limitations. Yeah, and make sure that you have some resources. With my students, I refer them to Speechling. I refer them to different YouTube videos. You are some teachers on iTalki are pronunciation specialists, but a lot of you aren't. A lot of us aren't, right? We're learning as we go, right? But accept your limitations. There are some sounds, like especially the L versus R sound, where I mean, I've taken phonetics in class, but I mean, I'm not an expert, right? So if you're not an expert, then point them to where they could go. Like, you're here for practice, you're here to help them out, to point them in the right direction, right? But if you have any limitations, draw the line and let them know, right? And try to give them the correct resources to work on those things. Yeah, and a lot of the things cannot be fixed in one simple class, and it is a real question of time and effort. Number 8, brush up on your understanding of UK and US English. Like, gosh, I can't imagine the amount of iTalki teachers from America or even from Britain who are telling their students that they are pronouncing things wrong just because they don't hear things pronounced that way on a daily basis. The English speaking world is massive. There are many, many different accents, right? And there are different standards of English as well. So, I mean, increasing your understanding of UK and US English, and if you can, even the differences with Australian English and South African English and Irish English and all these different varieties. I mean, like, that could really help you out, and it could give you a better understanding. And not only with pronunciation, but even, look, first of all, certain sounds might be easier for students from certain countries, because of the way that they're like the instead of r. It might be easier for certain students to actually use the British R instead of the American R for certain reasons, right? Or that could be a liaison to being able to pronounce the American R. So I give my students these options. As my dad's British and I grew up in a house where I heard that accent, And I've lived over in Ireland, and I was down in in Asia, and I've met people from all over the world. I have picked up these things, and I think it's really important for other teachers to do that as well. So make sure that you're again not telling them that it's wrong, unless if you actually know that nobody pronounces things that way, because a lot of the time, things that aren't pronounced in America or things that seem wrong here are actually correct in other places. Okay, cool. Um, Number nine, it's important to focus not only on accuracy but also on syllable stress. Yeah, like ability. Yeah, or accuracy. Yeah. Also focus on word stress and look for the patterns and show your students the patterns of what words you stress in a sentence, um, given the context, right? Like I ran quickly for the bus, you know? Which word in that sentence was stressed and why? Yeah. These things are not always cut and dry. A lot of this will come through osmosis, but it's not good to only focus on the one issue that your students have with English. And it's like, especially with accuracy, again, this is a very superficial way of looking at language. Like, I remember I was so ignorant towards this that some of my students would be pronouncing everything accurately. Every single sound was completely accurate, but it still sounded like this, and I did not know why. And I realized that this comes with their fluency. This comes with number 10, my final point, intonation. Yeah, finding liaisons, different ways that we connect the consonants with the vowels, you know, looking at the American T and how that could sound like a D sometimes, right? Like forget it. Yeah. So looking at these different things, accuracy, stress, and intonation could really be helpful for your students and for you. So now I'm going to explain a few things specifically that I work on with my students. All right. So first of all, as I said right there, linking words, because a lot of students are able to make every sound, but they're just not able to bring them together and allow them to flow. Yeah, so really work on bringing words together. Yeah, I got a lot of that instead of I got a lot of that. Yeah. Okay, work on common weak vowel sounds. Common, all right? If you need help with that, I think you should look at the top 2,000 core words in English, or maybe the top 5,000, depending on the level of your student. So one common one, vegetable, comfortable, definitely. You see how I'm skipping over sounds? And that's what we do. That's what we do with Wednesday, February. Yeah. Well, not really with February, but we do skip over certain letters. Yeah. So we have weak vowel sounds and we have silent letters. Focus on the common ones. Don't focus on some really abstract words that they probably won't come across. Yeah. Definitely. Use words in sentences. Always give them context. 100%. Focus on minimal pairs. Yeah, like sit, seat, bit, beat. Minimal pairs. But don't focus only on minimal pairs either. And that's why using words in context in sentences could really be useful too. The schwa sound, right? Why is my name Ryan Newman? Why isn't it Ryan Newman? Yeah. Get yourself acquainted with this sound, because this could save your students a lot of trouble, and this is closely linked as well with the stress that we put on words. And actually, from my time learning other languages, I found that this exists in other languages as well. Their weak vowel sounds or their schwa sounds exist too. So definitely have a look at that. Also recognize that different forms of a word could actually change the sound, like the stress. Okay, so for example, able, ability. Yeah. resource, resourceful, yeah, export, export. Yeah. So sometimes the different forms of a word or the different use, if it's an adjective or a noun or a verb, this could change the stress of a word too. All of these things could be tricky for a student, but again, it's really good for you to be able to compartmentalize and to organize these into boxes as a teacher, so that you have some sort of method and some sort of approach and, yeah, just method to your madness while you're teaching pronunciation. As I said before, it's a tricky subject, so if you're diving into it, I suggest that you don't dedicate too much time to pronunciation unless if your students are really struggling and really need it. It's not everything, but it is something. Yeah, this is a massive way for you to grow as a teacher and to improve your understanding of the English language as well. So definitely take the wheel and try to make the most of this opportunity. Anyway, if you have any suggestions for teaching pronunciation or for learning pronunciation, any activities, for example, just throw them down in the box below. I hope that this will help you with teaching pronunciation on iTalki and beyond. Thank you for watching, and keep smiling.